studying, it was the accepted mantra that this country has enough coal to last, somebody said 100 years, somebody said 200 years, somebody said 250 years. And here I am in my own professional lifetime seeing coal imports coming in. And therefore, we face a situation in which every fossil fuel is being imported, and there are many Indians who still do not have adequate and affordable energy, electricity as well as cooking fuels. What did this tell us? It told us that if we have to provide adequate and affordable energy to everybody, we need to ensure that, number one, it is used in an efficient manner, so that we get all the use that we want, we get all the lighting that we want, that's the use. But we use the minimum amount of energy that is needed to provide this lighting, energy efficiency. The second was that we had to depend ever more on domestic resources. So obviously it meant using the domestic fossil fuels, but it also meant a much greater emphasis on renewables. This country started out on the renewables path in the late 70s. We had a department and then a Ministry of Renewables, I don't know, starting from I think 81 or something of that sort, very, very long ago. So the political realization that renewables are important in providing adequate and affordable access to all is a strand that has been there, except that now it has come together in a program of enhancing the amount of renewables that we can generate and provide. Now, as we went along and tried to increase the amount of energy efficiency in our economy, as we tried to increase the amount of renewables that we were providing, we also learned a number of interesting lessons. For example, when we started off on the renewables program, and many of you will remember, in the early 90s we started on the wind energy program. All the wind energy turbines were imported. It was only by about 2000 that there was a adequate capacity to manufacture machines in this country. It was only by about 2003 that a truly Indian industry had evolved, which was designing machines that were meant for India. In this time, the price of wind-based electricity reduced from something of the order of 8 rupees a kilowatt hour to something of the order of about 3 rupees 50 paisa. Now, obviously, this is different in different places depending on how windy they are. But this was a time when there was an absolute decrease in the amount, in the price for wind electricity. Interestingly enough, that price is almost the same, somewhat less even now in 2016. While there has been inflation, while the price of coal-based electricity has increased, that of wind-based hasn't. So in real terms, there has been a spectacular decline in the price of electricity we get for wind. We are seeing exactly the same thing in solar energy. As we pushed solar energy, only 5 years ago, 2011 or so, a kilowatt hour, a unit of electricity from solar was about 18 rupees. However, as volumes increased, as we put into place a competitive procurement regime, as we did more and more of it, prices have dropped, and a few weeks ago we found through competitive bidding a price of 4 rupees 32 paisa for a unit of solar electricity. But it's still double the price of what you get from a new supercritical coal-based power station. So And in energy efficiency, the story is very similar. In the chamber, I've told earlier the story of what we are seeing with LED bulbs. 3 years ago, a LED bulb in the retail market was something like 600 rupees or 500 rupees. But even at 500 rupees, compared to a CFL, you will get your money back in 3 years because it uses half as much electricity to deliver the same amount of light as a CFL. But it was not selling. What we realized was that people, number one, weren't sure, if I put in this much money, will it actually continue working, or will I have spent 500 rupees for nothing? The second was, this was a large sum of money, and therefore paying it at one go was also a challenge. And so the business model that was developed through this company that was created, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, and Saurabh Kumar, who is the managing director of that company, is another friend of the chamber who has been here very often. The model was, or is, that the EESL procures the bulbs, the LED bulbs, and through the distribution company sells them to you and I, who are consumers who are of the distribution companies. And they did two things. One, they said, you pay 10 rupees a month, which will be collected through your electricity bill. Very easy, people liked it. So over a period of time, we'll collect the total cost of this LED bulb, and the distribution company will transfer it to EESL. So there is no subsidy involved, but it's something that makes life easier for the consumer. The second was, if this fails, it will be changed, no questions asked. That gave consumers the confidence that if we buy this, if we pay for it, 10 rupees a month, I will have something which will keep working for a long time. As of yesterday, 90 million LED bulbs have been sold through this program across the country. Very interestingly, when the first procurement occurred through EESL in January 2015, the price was 310 rupees. Yesterday, day before yesterday, in their latest procurement, the price was 56 rupees. What a drop. What does this tell us? Both the renewables and the energy efficiency stories tell us that we need to build markets. We need to enhance the amount of technology that we are procuring that leads to cost reductions, that leads to performance enhancement. So we went to Paris knowing all of this. So what this slide does is it summarizes the learnings that we had. That yes, we can move to technologies that reduce carbon dioxide while providing the same level of service. But we need to address the issue that the costs are higher, both for renewables and energy efficiency, certainly in the first instance, and for renewables even in the long-term instance. So we need to know how to deal with this. And the challenge, therefore, is how do you meet the higher costs upfront? How do you absorb it in the time that it takes for it to become viable? What have we done in renewables? In renewables, every state says, I will buy X percent, 2%, 3%, 4% of electricity from renewables, and I'll pay for it. Now, what the regulators do is they fix the percentage so that the impact on the tariffs, on the overall tariffs, is something like 5, 6, 7 paisa per kilowatt hour. If they had fixed it at 10 or 15%, the impact would have been a rupee, which you and I as consumers would have found unreasonable, and certainly poorer consumers would not be able to pay. Already, as I said, we started out by learning that even though we have enough electricity in the market today, it is not bought because it is thought to be too expensive. So by bringing in even more expensive electricity, we need to calibrate it at a rate at which it can still be acceptable. So as prices have dropped, regulators have increased the percentage of electricity they get from renewables. So fixing a percentage, price drop, fixing a higher percentage, price drop, it's something that we have learned. In the case of LED, again, we have learned a procurement business model that provides it to people at prices they're willing and able to pay. So we went into Paris understanding that this is a strategy that we will need to put into place. The issue really is about timing. How quickly can you bring in more and more renewables and still you and I are willing to pay? How quickly can we bring in LED bulbs at prices that you and I are willing to pay? And as I said, the other climate understanding that we had when we went in was we had to be part of a global deal, and that we had to find a solution in which countries would not walk out. Okay, so this is the background with which we went to Paris. Now, what did we do at Paris? I would not like to spend time on the minutiae of the negotiations, except to say that we found a very positive attitude. I want to particularly compliment the leadership that the French presidency took in moving us all ahead. All of us went there with certain briefs. When you go for a negotiation, you are given a brief which is approved by the cabinet, and it says this is how much you can negotiate. The French presidency pushed us, cajoled us, pulled us to do more. I mean, at least in the case of India, I can certainly say, and I think it's true of every major economy, we had to call back our capitals and seek permission to move beyond what had been agreed. In that sense, we achieved an agreement which I think is truly remarkable. Why is it remarkable? Again, everything that has happened there is not necessarily of the greatest national interest to us. They do present us a challenge, but that's what negotiations are about. We have accepted parts of the Paris Agreement that will be challenging to us to meet. Now, one of the things that was agreed was that we will work together to make sure that the global temperature rise is a maximum of 2 degrees, but hopefully much less, closer to 1.5. I mean, I can tell you from arithmetic, 1.5 is not possible. But nevertheless, what it showed was that there was a global, public, and national agreement that we needed to keep the temperature change to be as low as possible. I think that's the more important point. And we set an upper limit of 2. Earlier it used to be about 2. 2.2 is also about 2. But now it has to be below 2. That, I think, I consider as a major movement ahead as far as the Paris Agreement is concerned. The second is that all countries, including developing countries like India, will commit to a goal. As I said earlier, we had gone knowing that an agreement is only possible if everybody takes part. But what was important was, and this had actually started becoming clear even before Paris, but at Paris we finalized a deal in which each country pledges what it will do. And at the moment, the pledges are what are known as the INDCs, the intended nationally determined contributions. What is also true is that when you add up all the INDCs, they do not take us to a temperature of less than 2. In fact, they take us to a temperature of 2.7. And that led to the question, well, if each country is saying what it wants to do, and if we also want to reach a maximum of 2, what next? And therefore, what was agreed was a ratcheting up mechanism, that each country would periodically pledge more. Mr. Mukherjee talked of the global stock-taking mechanism, that periodically we would put together all the information that we have about the climate system and about what we have been doing collectively across the world, and say, well, we want to reach 2, but whatever we are doing are reaching 2.7 or 2.5 or whatever it is, and therefore we need to do more. And then each country pledges to do more. Now, this is a truly innovative way of moving ahead. Because think of it, you and I, we are not being forced. We have looked at our own data, we have looked at our own trends, and we are committing a particular climate goal. We are committing it. The chances that we will meet it, therefore, are high. This is very different from the Kyoto type top-down architecture where everybody was told this is what you have to do. Because then if I don't meet it, I step out. I said, forget it. You know, that's proven. I mean, that we saw what happened. And the second is that as I achieve my goal, I have the confidence that I can achieve it and probably achieve more. And my negotiating partners have the trust that I will deliver on what I have promised. What this does, it creates a virtuous cycle of trust and confidence, something that was sorely lacking in the negotiations for many, many years. This, again, I believe, is a step in the right direction. Now, whether it will happen or not, the future will tell. But I believe that the steps are there, that if each one of us promises to do what we have said, it will build this virtuous cycle of trust and confidence. Now, immediately the question was, okay, you have pledged this. You may have pledged it because you wanted to look good at Paris. How will we know that you are doing what you have promised? And therefore, there is a transparency mechanism. Each one of us tells our own citizens, tells the world what we are doing, how are we moving towards what we have pledged. This will get you and I, our friends in the press, our friends in the NGO sector, to start looking closely at actions. For any government, be it India, be it France, be it the US, be it Germany, be it Japan, for every government, national constituencies matter far more than international constituencies do. When you and I question our government, it is far more likely to respond than if, say, the presidents of other countries tell them, you know, this is something that you should do. So what we have done at Paris is turned global pressure groups into national pressure groups. This, I think, changes the dynamics within which climate change action would be framed in the years to come. Now, having said this, there are also 2 or 3 things where I think we have fallen short. There is wording there, inadequate in my opinion, not in my delegation's opinion, in my opinion, about financing. When we went to Paris, we went knowing that It is possible to move on a low carbon path, the energy efficiency and renewable examples that I provided you. And we will do it. It may take us 40 years, 50 years. If we have to do it sooner, clearly this has to be driven, say, by things like lower cost financing, by support that reduces the cost of these technologies so that people adopt them sooner rather than later. And as I said, while there are words there about looking at this financing, they are just that, they are words. They are very similar words to what we have seen in the past. For example, in the Copenhagen Accord, which said that the developed world would get together and make sure that there is a fund flow of about $100 billion a year by 2020. We don't believe it is happening. And we are therefore extremely conscious of the fact that major funding may not be available in the future. And therefore, whatever we have committed to has to be achieved with global resources. There may be something on the periphery, but that's about it. So that's a reality that has happened. The second is that as we move ahead, we talked again of renewables and energy efficiency, we talked of wind energy, we talked of solar, we talked of LEDs. All of these are technology disruptions. We are bringing in technologies which did not exist earlier in order to move to the lower carbon pathway. Where will these technologies come from? In the climate negotiations in the years past, we had negotiated a technology mechanism with the view that this provides the institutional wherewithal within which technology flows could occur. We have again in Paris said that we will work with the technology mechanism and see how it can promote technologies. Well, it hasn't in the past, and there is nothing that has been done in the Paris Accord to push us moving ahead on technology any faster. So again, now if you look at the past, we have got LED technology, we've got wind technology, we've got solar technology. So it's not as if, again, that the acquisition of these technologies by themselves is going to be a problem. Again, it is a matter of timing. So when you put these two things together, finance and technology, it tells us that these will be largely driven by the resources and by the capabilities that we have nationally. It hasn't helped, for example, that as we started a solar program, we had a component which was for domestic procurement. This was taken to the WTO. The WTO has ruled against us, and that therefore starts off a political debate as to why on earth should we put in national resources if these are going to flow somewhere else. These are the kinds of political issues that are going to happen as we go ahead and implement our commitments. Nevertheless, what was good at Paris was that despite the weak technology language in the accord itself, we did launch two major alliances. One called Mission Innovation, largely led by President Obama and supported by President Hollande and Prime Minister Modi, which looks at the world doubling its R&D expenditure in clean energy with a view to providing the kinds of technologies that we need tomorrow. And the second is the International Solar Alliance, largely led by Prime Minister Modi, but also with strong support from the US, from France, from 120 countries who have become partners in the International Solar Alliance, with the goal of learning together, developing specifications together, and taking the market towards a larger demand so that both the technology development and the prices can move in a direction that early adoption can occur. So these were positive things that happened at Paris. Let me now spend the last few minutes on the challenges for us. As was mentioned, in our INDCs, we have committed that the carbon intensity of our economy, that is emissions divided by the GDP, would decrease by 33 to 35% in 2030 compared to what it was in 2005. Now, today, in Copenhagen, we committed that by 2020, we would be 20 to 25% less in 2020 compared to 2005. So this is, in a sense, an extension of that pledge. We pledged 20 to 25%. The chances are we will end up at somewhere in the 20 to 22% range. So we will meet it on the lower range. And now we have pledged more for 2030. So this is an example of how the ratcheting up could occur. We have also promised that at least 40% of the installed electricity generating capacity in this country would be non-fossil fuel, largely renewables, but also hydro, nuclear, and so on. We have also promised 2.5 billion tons of CO2 sequestration. We have also put in our INDCs what we will do as far as adaptation is concerned. But again, as far as the Paris Accord is concerned, it's more mitigation-centric. It does have language about adaptation, but not any global goals of the kind that we saw on the mitigation side. How will we meet these? I think there are three major challenges. The first is we will need to ensure that new technologies keep flowing in, that their penetration is increased, it is accepted, we reach prices that you and I are willing to pay for them. This means that if we want to do this quickly, we need to ensure that the cost of capital is reduced. This is particularly important. Now you think of it, if you set a coal power station, it costs about 4.5 crores a megawatt. Then you buy coal. And each year the coal that you will buy would, for this 1 megawatt power station, would cost how much? It would cost something in the vicinity of about 750 million rupees a year. So that's the kind of economics that occurs. But every year I'm buying the coal, I'm using it, I'm getting paid for the electricity. So the money that I borrow is then paid off over a long period of time. Now, in the case of renewables, if I look at wind, it costs the same amount as for a megawatt as does coal, 4.5 crores. But the amount of electricity that it generates is possibly 1/3 that which is generated by a coal power station. And then I'm not buying coal every year. So all the resources that I have are capitalized. So as a part of my annual cash flow, the interest repayment is the largest block of outflows.